The woman crouched by the fence post had hair the color of autumn wheat, and Owen Xavier had never seen anyone look at his horses the way she did, like they were something sacred worth capturing on paper. He had ridden out to check the northern pasture of his ranch outside Ellsworth, Kansas, on that September morning in 1882, not expecting to find anyone trespassing on his land, let alone a young woman with a leather portfolio balanced on her knees and charcoal staining her fingertips. The sun hung low enough to cast everything in amber, and his 3 Mustangs grazed near enough to her that they clearly did not mind her presence. Animals always knew things about people that humans took months to figure out. Owen dismounted slowly, not wanting to startle her or the horses. His boots made soft sounds in the prairie grass as he approached, and when she finally noticed him, her hand froze mid-stroke across the paper. Her eyes were the pale green of new leaves, wide with surprise but not fear. That told him something right there. "Those are my horses," he said, keeping his voice level and curious rather than accusatory. She stood quickly, nearly dropping her portfolio, and he noticed she wore a simple cotton dress the color of cornflour, practical but well made. Dust covered the hem, and her boots looked worn from walking. "I apologize, sir. I was passing through your property and they were so beautiful in this light, I could not resist. I meant no harm." Her voice carried an education, the kind that came from back east probably, though there was something genuine in it that made him think she was not just another city girl playing at adventure. He stepped closer and gestured to the portfolio. "May I see?" She hesitated, then held out the leather case. He opened it carefully, his calloused hands awkward with the delicate pages, and found himself looking at a dozen sketches of Kansas landscapes, buildings in Ellsworth, and on the most recent page, his Mustangs captured in motion so lifelike he almost expected them to leap off the paper. She had talent, real talent, the kind that made you forget you were looking at charcoal and paper instead of living, breathing creatures. "These are remarkable," Owen said honestly. He was not a man given to empty compliments. "You have a gift." A flush colored her cheeks, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Thank you. I am Catherine Zimmerman. I arrived in Ellsworth 3 weeks ago from Philadelphia. My uncle owns the general store, and I am staying with him while I recover from needing a change of scenery." There was a story there, Owen could tell, something painful enough that she had fled halfway across the country to escape it. He understood that impulse. He had been running from his own ghosts for years now. "Owen Xavier," he said, offering his hand. Her grip was firm, her palm warm despite the morning chill. "I own this ranch, about 2,000 acres running up to the Smoky Hill River. You are welcome to sketch here anytime you like, Miss Zimmerman, as long as you do not mind the occasional interruption from the owner." Her smile transformed her face from merely pretty to genuinely beautiful. "That is very kind of you, Mr. Xavier. Most property owners would have me arrested for trespassing. Most property owners do not get to see their horses rendered so perfectly," he replied. "Besides, I figure anyone the Mustangs trust cannot be too dangerous." She laughed at that, a sound like water over stones, clear and bright. "Your horses are magnificent. Mustangs, you said?" "Wild caught. I caught them myself 2 years ago," Owen confirmed. "Broke them gentle, worked with them patient. They have good hearts, these 3. The gray mare especially, she is smart as any horse I have known." Catherine looked at the horses with renewed interest, and he found himself watching her instead of them, noting the way concentration creased her brow and how the morning light caught in her hair. He had been alone on this ranch for 3 years, ever since his brother died of pneumonia and left him the sole Xavier on this stretch of Kansas prairie. The loneliness had settled into his bones like winter cold, something he barely noticed anymore until this moment, standing next to a woman who looked at the world like it was worth preserving on paper. "Mr. Xavier," Catherine said slowly, still studying the horses, "would you consider commissioning a proper portrait of your horses? I could paint them in oils if you have a photograph, or if they would stand still long enough for multiple sittings. I am trying to establish myself as an artist here, and I need work to build a portfolio and earn my keep." Owen considered this. He had been thinking about what to do with the empty walls of his ranch house, how the place felt more like a way station than a home. "I would like that," he said. "But I have a better idea. Why do not you come to the ranch proper, see the whole spread? I have more than these 3. Got a dozen horses total, couple of them real beauties. You could sketch them all, decide which would make the best painting." Uncertainty flickered across her face, propriety warring with opportunity. "I do not know if that would be appropriate, Mr. Xavier. An unmarried woman visiting a bachelor's ranch alone." "Bring your uncle," Owen suggested. "Come for Sunday dinner this week." "I promise you, Miss Zimmerman, I am harmless. Ask anyone in Ellsworth. They will tell you Owen Xavier is the dullest, most respectable rancher in the county. I attend church, pay my bills on time, and have never caused a moment's trouble." That made her laugh again. "Somehow that sounds like an admission of extreme boredom." "You have no idea," he said with feeling, and they both smiled. They talked for another hour there by the fence line, about her journey west, about his ranch, about the way Kansas light differed from Pennsylvania light, about horses and art, and the strange restlessness that brought people to the frontier. Owen found himself saying things he had not said to anyone, about how he had inherited this land from his brother, how he sometimes felt like he was just keeping the place warm for a future that would never arrive, how he had forgotten what it felt like to have something to look forward to beyond the next season's work. Catherine listened with those attentive green eyes, and when she spoke about Philadelphia, about a failed engagement to a man who wanted a decorative wife rather than an artist, about her family's disappointment and her desperate need to find a place where she could breathe, Owen understood in his marrow that they were 2 souls cut from similar cloth. The sun climbed higher and Catherine finally gathered her things. "I should return to town before my uncle sends a search party. He worries." "Sunday dinner then," Owen pressed. "Bring your uncle, your chaperone, the whole town if it makes you comfortable, but please come." She studied him for a long moment, and he felt assessed in a way that had nothing to do with his appearance and everything to do with his character. Whatever she saw must have satisfied her because she nodded. "Sunday dinner. We will be there at 1 o'clock if that suits you." "That suits me fine." Owen watched her walk back toward the road where presumably she had left a horse or wagon, her portfolio tucked under her arm. She turned once to wave, and he raised his hand in return, feeling something unfamiliar and fragile bloom in his chest. Hope, maybe. Possibility. He rode back to the ranch house with his mind already racing ahead, thinking about what needed cleaning, what supplies he needed from town, whether his cooking skills were adequate for company. The house came into view, a solid 2-story structure his brother had built with their father before the old man passed. It was well maintained but sparse, lacking any woman's touch or personal warmth. Owen had never bothered much with decoration, seeing no point when no one visited, and he barely noticed his surroundings. Now he noticed. Now he saw the bare walls, the functional furniture, the absence of anything beautiful or unnecessary. He thought about Catherine's sketches, about art that captured moments and made them permanent, and something shifted in his understanding of what a home could be. The next few days passed in a blur of activity unusual for Owen's normally predictable routine. He rode into Ellsworth to buy supplies, stopping at the general store where Catherine's uncle, George Zimmerman, ran a tidy operation selling everything from flour to fabric. George was a weathered man in his 50s with shrewd eyes and a protective air when Owen mentioned the Sunday dinner invitation. "My niece is a good girl," George said carefully. "Come out here to heal from some heartbreak. I do not want to see her hurt again." "Neither do I," Owen replied honestly. "I just want to get to know her if she is willing. Everything proper and above board." George studied him the way Catherine had, that same assessing look that seemed to run in the family. "You have a good reputation, Xavier. People say you are honest, hard-working, keep to yourself. Catherine could do worse, I suppose, though I hate to see her settle down too quickly. She just got free." "I am not trying to trap anyone," Owen said. "Just offering dinner and maybe some work if she wants it." George's expression softened slightly. "She is talented, my niece. Really talented. Shame her family back east could not see it. They wanted her married to that banker's son, playing hostess at dinner parties, having babies. Never mind what she wanted." Owen bought flour, sugar, coffee, fresh vegetables, and a bottle of decent wine, feeling George's eyes on him the whole time. He understood the protectiveness. If he had a niece like Catherine, he would be protective too. Saturday he spent cleaning the house from top to bottom, sweeping, dusting, beating rugs, scrubbing floors. His housekeeper, Mrs. Rodriguez, only came once a week, and he suddenly regretted not hiring her more often. He polished the dining table his grandfather had shipped from Ohio, set out his mother's good dishes, picked wildflowers for the table because he had no garden to cut from. He practiced cooking, ruining one roast before managing a second that looked acceptable. He baked bread that came out lopsided but edible. He stood in the middle of his clean kitchen Sunday morning and wondered when he had last cared this much about anything besides his horses and his land. The answer was never. He had never cared like this. At 1 o'clock precisely, a wagon rolled up the drive. Owen stepped out onto the porch, wiping his palms on his trousers and feeling absurdly nervous. Catherine sat beside her uncle, wearing a dress the color of sage with a white collar, her hair pinned up beneath a simple hat. She looked around at the ranch with undisguised interest, taking in the corrals, the barn, the house itself. "Welcome," Owen called, moving to help her down from the wagon. Her hand was warm in his, and when she smiled up at him, his nervousness transformed into something stronger, more certain. "Thank you for having us, Mr. Xavier. Your ranch is beautiful." George climbed down more slowly, his joints stiff from the ride. Owen shook his hand and led them both inside, suddenly seeing his home through their eyes. It was clean now, at least, and the wildflowers added some color, but it still looked like what it was, a bachelor's house, functional and lonely. "Forgive the plainness," Owen said as they entered the dining room. "I am not much for decoration." "It has good bones," Catherine said diplomatically, though her eyes lingered on the empty walls. "Strong and honest like the man who lives here, I imagine." They sat down to dinner, and Owen served the roast with vegetables, the lopsided bread, a berry pie he had bought from the bakery in town because he knew better than to attempt dessert himself. The conversation flowed easily despite George's initial reserve. They talked about ranching, about the changes coming to Kansas with more settlers arriving every year, about the railroad and what it meant for towns like Ellsworth. Catherine spoke little during the meal, listening more than talking, but her eyes never stopped moving, taking everything in. Owen caught her studying the light through the windows, the way it fell across the table, and he wondered if she was already planning sketches in her mind. After dinner, George settled in the parlor with coffee while Owen gave Catherine a tour of the property. They walked to the corrals where his horses gathered, curious about the visitors. Catherine immediately pulled out a small sketchbook she had tucked in her pocket and began capturing quick studies, her hand moving with confident strokes. "That one," Owen said, pointing to a chestnut stallion with a white blaze, "that is Copper. Got him as a colt from a ranch down in Texas. He is the foundation of my breeding program, strong bloodlines, good temperament." "He is beautiful," Catherine murmured, still sketching. "The way he holds his head, proud but not arrogant. You can see his intelligence in his eyes." They moved from horse to horse, and Owen found himself talking more than he usually did, explaining his plans for the ranch, his hopes to breed quality horses that could handle ranch work, but also be gentle enough for families. He told her about his brother, how they had built this dream together, how losing him had nearly made Owen give up and sell everything. "What stopped you?" Catherine asked, pausing in her sketching to look at him directly. "I did not have anywhere else to go," Owen admitted. "And I figured I owed it to my brother to see it through. He believed in this place, in what we could build. Felt wrong to abandon it just because he was gone." Understanding flickered in Catherine's eyes. "I know something about living up to other people's dreams. Though in my case, I ran away from them rather than honoring them. I am not sure which takes more courage." "You came to Kansas," Owen pointed out. "Left everything you knew, started over in a place where you had no connections except one uncle. That takes courage, or desperation." But she smiled when she said it, and he smiled back. They walked farther out, following a path that led to a small rise overlooking the ranch. From here, you could see the sweep of prairie in all directions, the Smoky Hill River glinting in the distance, the big Kansas sky arching overhead. Catherine stopped, caught by the view, and Owen watched her face transform with wonder. "This," she whispered. "This is what I have been trying to capture since I arrived. This feeling. The space, the light, the possibility of it all." Owen looked at the landscape he saw every day, trying to view it fresh through her eyes. "It is just prairie." "No," Catherine said firmly. "It is freedom. It is a future that has not been written yet." Back in Philadelphia, everything was already decided, mapped out, no room for anything unexpected. Here, you can see for miles, and there is nothing stopping you from riding in any direction you choose. He understood then that she was not just talking about landscape. She was talking about her life, about choices, about the difference between obligation and opportunity. And he found himself wanting fiercely to be part of that open future she saw, to be one of the possibilities on her horizon. "Come back," he said impulsively. "Bring your supplies. Spend days here if you want. Paint my horses, paint the prairie, paint whatever you see. I have a spare room, very respectable, and Mrs. Rodriguez can chaperone. You would have all the space and light you need." Catherine turned to look at him, surprise and something more complicated in her expression. "Mr. Xavier, that is a very generous offer, but people would talk. An unmarried woman staying at a bachelor's ranch." "Let them talk," Owen said, surprised by his own boldness. "I spent 3 years not caring what anyone thought because I was too buried in grief and work to notice. You spent years caring too much what everyone thought, and it nearly destroyed what makes you special. Maybe we have both earned the right to stop worrying so much about propriety and start thinking about what would make us happy." She was quiet for a long moment, her eyes searching his face. "You barely know me, Mr. Xavier. I know you are kind to animals and talented and brave enough to start over. I know I have felt more alive in the past week, since I saw you by that fence, than I have in 3 years. I know I would like the chance to know you better, if you will allow it." He paused, then added, "And I know that the light on this rise at sunset would be perfect for painting." That made her laugh, breaking the tension. "You are either very wise or very foolish, Mr. Xavier." "Owen," he corrected. "Please call me Owen, and I have never claimed to be wise. But I know what I want when I see it." "And what do you want?" The question hung between them, weighted with meaning beyond the words. Owen could have deflected, made a joke about wanting good paintings for his walls. Instead, he chose honesty. "I want someone to share this place with. Someone who sees what I see in it, the potential. I want conversation and laughter, and a reason to cook actual meals instead of just eating cold beef at the kitchen counter. I want to watch someone create beautiful things and know I helped make that possible. And I want very much to get to know you better, Catherine Zimmerman, to understand what makes you laugh and what you dream about and whether there is any chance you might want the same things I want." Her breath caught, her cheeks flushing pink. "We have known each other 4 days. Yes. This is impulsive and possibly insane. Yes, people will definitely talk. Almost certainly." She bit her lip, and he could see the war between caution and desire playing out across her face. Finally, she said, "I need to think about it. It is a lot. And I just ended an engagement 6 months ago. I came here to find myself, not to jump immediately into another entanglement." "I understand," Owen said, and he did, even as disappointment settled in his chest. "Take all the time you need. The offer stands, whether you decide to take it tomorrow or next month or never. No pressure, no expectations." They walked back to the house where George waited, and Catherine was quieter during the ride back to town, her sketchbook unopened on her lap. Owen watched them go, wondering if he had pushed too hard, asked too much too soon. He had never been good at reading people, preferred horses to humans for exactly this reason. Horses told you straight out what they were feeling. Humans hid behind words and manners and fear. The week that followed stretched endless. Owen threw himself into ranch work, mending fences, training a young mare, riding out to check on his cattle herd. He went into Ellsworth twice for supplies and saw Catherine once, walking past the general store with her sketchbook. She waved, friendly but distant, and did not stop to talk. Owen told himself he had expected this, that he had known the odds, but the disappointment still stung. On Friday evening, a week after the Sunday dinner, he was grooming Copper in the barn when he heard a wagon approaching. He stepped outside to see Catherine driving a small trap by herself, no chaperone, her painting supplies stacked in the back. She pulled up in front of the barn and set the brake, but did not immediately climb down. "I have been thinking," she called out. Owen walked closer, his heart suddenly pounding. "And you were right. I have spent too much time worrying about what other people think, making myself small to fit into other people's expectations. I came to Kansas to find out who I am when no one is watching, when I am free to make my own choices." She took a deep breath. "So I choose to accept your offer. I will paint your horses and your prairie, and I will stay in your spare room with Mrs. Rodriguez as chaperone when she is here, and my own good sense as chaperone when she is not. And the town can talk all it wants." The relief and joy that flooded through Owen nearly buckled his knees. He reached up to help her down, his hands on her waist, and when her feet touched the ground she did not immediately step back. They stood close enough that he could see gold flecks in her green eyes, could smell the lavender soap she used. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You will not regret this." "I hope not," she replied, but she was smiling. "Though I make no promises about my cooking, I am fairly useless in the kitchen. I can cook enough for both of us. You handle the art, I will handle the food." They unloaded her supplies together, and Owen showed her to the spare room on the second floor. It was plain like the rest of the house, but it had a large window facing east that flooded the space with morning light. Catherine set down her bag and immediately went to the window, looking out over the ranch. "This is perfect," she said. "I can work here." Owen stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of the intimacy of having her in his home in what had been his private space for so long. "Make it yours," he said. "Move the furniture however you like, use the walls for sketches, whatever you need." She turned from the window, her expression serious. "Owen, I need you to understand. I am not ready for anything more than friendship and working together. I am still healing from what happened in Philadelphia. I need time and space to figure out who I am." "I understand," Owen said, and he did, even as part of him wanted to argue that he knew already who she was and that they could build something real together. But he had rushed things once already. He could afford to be patient now. Friendship and collaboration, that is enough, and for a while it was. Catherine settled into the ranch with surprising ease, rising early to catch the dawn light, spending hours at her easel or with her sketchbook, capturing Owen's horses in every mood and moment. She painted the chestnut stallion Copper at full gallop, the gray mare with her wise eyes, the young colts playing in the pasture. She painted the ranch buildings against sunset, the prairie grass bending in the wind, the endless sky that made Kansas feel like the edge of the world. Owen went about his work but found himself constantly aware of her presence, stealing glances at her as she worked, listening for her footsteps in the house. They fell into an easy routine. He cooked breakfast and she cleaned up. He worked the ranch during the day while she painted. They met for dinner and talked for hours about everything and nothing, their conversations ranging from philosophy to practical matters to shared stories of their pasts. Mrs. Rodriguez came 3 times a week and clucked approvingly at having another woman in the house, even if the arrangement was unconventional. She liked Catherine immediately, and the two women often spoke Spanish together, which Catherine was learning with the same focus she brought to her art. The town did talk, as predicted. Ellsworth was a rough place in many ways, a former cowtown just settling into respectability, but it still had its share of gossips and moralists. Owen heard the whispers when he went in for supplies, saw the speculative looks. George Zimmerman pulled him aside one day at the general store. "People are saying things about you and my niece," George said without preamble, questioning her virtue. Owen felt anger flash through him. Catherine is doing nothing wrong. She is an artist working on a commission with proper chaperone present regularly. If people have too much time to gossip, maybe they should find more productive occupations. "I agree," George surprised him by saying, "but you should be aware, and you should know that I am keeping a close watch. Catherine is precious to me. If you hurt her, Xavier, reputation or not, you will answer to me." "If I hurt her," Owen replied, "I will deserve whatever you do to me, but I promise you, George, that is the last thing I want." As summer turned to autumn, Owen realized he was falling in love. It happened gradually, in 1,000 small moments. The way Catherine bit her lower lip when concentrating. The laugh she gave when one of the colts tried to eat her paintbrush. The conversations on the porch after dinner, watching the sun set over the prairie while she told him about her dreams of having her work shown in galleries, of proving to her family that she could be successful on her own terms. He loved the focus she brought to her work, the way she could lose herself for hours in a painting. He loved how she talked to the horses while she sketched them, carrying on entire conversations as if they might answer. He loved watching her discover Kansas, the wonder in her eyes when she saw her first dust devil or witnessed a thunderstorm rolling across the plains. What scared him was that he thought maybe she was falling too, though she never said anything. He caught her watching him sometimes when she thought he was not looking. She found excuses to touch him, brushing imaginary dust from his shoulder, placing her hand on his arm when she laughed. She asked his opinion on her paintings. valued his input even though he knew nothing about art, and seemed genuinely pleased when he praised her work. But she never spoke of the future beyond the next painting, never indicated whether she planned to stay at the ranch or eventually return to town or even go back east. Owen wanted to ask, wanted to lay his feelings bare, but he remembered her words about needing time and space. He could give her that, even if the waiting sometimes felt like slow torture. In October, Catherine finished her first major painting, a large oil canvas showing copper running free across the prairie with the ranch buildings visible in the background. It was stunning, capturing not just the physical reality of the scene but something deeper, some essence of freedom and wildness and home all mixed together. "This is extraordinary," Owen said, standing before the finished work in her makeshift studio. "Catherine, you are incredibly talented." She stood beside him, nervously twisting her hands. "You really like it. I love it. It is exactly what I hoped for and more." He paused, then added, "What will you do with it, beyond hanging it in my house?" "I thought I would photograph it and send copies to some galleries back east," Catherine admitted. "See if anyone is interested in more Western scenes. There is a market for it, I think. People in the cities are fascinated by the frontier." "You should," Owen encouraged. "You should show the world what you can do." That evening, emboldened by the success of the painting, Owen suggested they take a ride out to the rise to watch the sunset. Catherine agreed readily, and they rode out together on two of his gentlest horses. The October air held a crisp edge, hint of the winter to come, but the sun still carried warmth. They dismounted at the top of the rise and stood side by side, watching the sun sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple and gold. Catherine sighed contentedly. "I never want to leave," she said quietly. "Is that strange? I have only been here 2 months, but this place feels more like home than Philadelphia ever did." Owen's heart kicked against his ribs. "You could stay. The ranch is big enough for two, more than big enough." She glanced at him sideways. "Owen, what are you saying?" He turned to face her fully, knowing he was about to either change his life or ruin everything, but unable to stay silent any longer. "I am saying that I have loved having you here. I am saying that the house feels empty when you are not in it, that my days are better when they include you. I am saying that I think about the future now, actually imagine what might come next, and in every version of that future, you are there." Catherine's eyes widened. "Owen, I know you said you needed time and space," he continued, the words tumbling out now that he had started. "And I have tried to respect that. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and sometimes you have to take a chance on something good when you find it. So I am asking, Catherine, if there is any possibility that you might feel the same way. Because I am in love with you, and I want to build a life together, here on this ranch or anywhere else you want to be." She was quiet for a long moment, long enough that Owen felt his heart begin to sink. Then she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. "I have been so scared," she whispered. "Scared of making another mistake, of losing myself again in someone else's dreams. But Owen, this does not feel like that. When I am with you, I feel more myself than I ever have. You do not try to make me smaller or quieter. You celebrate what I love, encourage my work. You make me feel safe and seen and valued." "You are all those things," Owen said fiercely. "And more. You are talented and brave and kind. You make everything better just by being in it." Catherine smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "I think I am in love with you too. I have been trying not to be, trying to convince myself it was too soon, too risky. But I cannot help it. You have shown me what it is like to be with someone who wants me to be exactly who I am." Owen pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, feeling her arms come around his waist in return. They stood like that as the sun set, holding each other, and Owen felt something broken inside him finally start to heal. He had been alone for so long, had forgotten what it felt like to be part of something bigger than himself. "Marry me," he said into her hair. It was too soon, too fast, but he could not hold the words back. "I know it is quick. I know we should probably wait, but marry me, Catherine. Let me spend the rest of my life making you happy, supporting your art, building something beautiful together." She pulled back to look at him, her face serious. "Owen, are you sure? We have only known each other 2 months. I have never been more sure of anything," he replied. "But if you need more time, I will wait. I will wait as long as you need." Catherine studied his face in the fading light, and whatever she saw there must have convinced her because she nodded slowly. "Yes, yes, I will marry you. Not because I need rescuing or because I need a home, but because I choose you. I choose this life we could build together." Owen kissed her then, finally, and it was everything he had imagined and more. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her hands coming up to frame his face, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathless and laughing. "We are completely insane," Catherine said, but she was grinning. "Probably," Owen agreed. "But I would rather be insane and happy than careful and alone." They rode back to the ranch as stars began appearing overhead, and Owen felt like the sky could not contain his happiness. When they reached the barn and were unsaddling the horses, Catherine suddenly stopped. "Wait," she said. "I want to sketch something." She pulled out her ever-present sketchbook and began drawing rapidly. Owen watched, curious, as an image took shape on the page. It was the two of them, standing together looking out at the horizon, but behind them she drew the ranch house, children playing in the yard, more horses in the corrals, gardens blooming. A complete life, a possible future, all captured in charcoal and paper. "What is this?" Owen asked, though he could see clearly enough. "You asked me to draw your horses," Catherine said, still sketching, "but now I think you should ask me to draw something else." Owen understood, his throat tight with emotion. "Catherine, would you draw our future together?" She looked up from the sketchbook, her eyes shining. "I already am." They told George the next day, riding into Ellsworth together to share the news. George looked skeptical at first, asking pointed questions about whether Catherine was certain, whether this was what she really wanted, or if she was just caught up in the romance of it all. But when Catherine explained how she felt, how Owen supported her art and wanted her to succeed, how they had built a genuine partnership, George's expression softened. "You look happy, Kitty," he said, using her childhood nickname. "Really happy. I have not seen you look like this since you were a little girl." "I am happy, Uncle George, happier than I thought possible." George turned to Owen. "You will support her art. Let her be who she is." "I will do everything in my power to help her succeed," Owen promised. "Her talent is a gift, and I would never try to diminish it." "Then you have my blessing," George said gruffly, pulling Catherine into a hug. "Your parents will probably disown you for marrying a cowboy, but I think you are making the right choice." "They disowned me when I refused to marry Edward," Catherine said. "I have already grieved that loss. This is about my life now, my future." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Ellsworth, with George giving Catherine away in half the town attending despite, or perhaps because of the gossip. Catherine wore a simple white dress she sewed herself, and Owen wore his best suit, the one he had bought for his brother's funeral and never worn since. When he said his vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when Catherine said hers, her eyes never left his face. "Mrs. Rodriguez cried happy tears throughout the ceremony. Several of Owen's ranching neighbors clapped him on the back afterward, telling him he was a lucky man. George hosted a reception at the general store, pushing aside merchandise to make room for tables of food and a small space for dancing. Owen and Catherine shared their first dance to fiddle music, spinning around the crowded floor while everyone watched and applauded. "No regrets," Owen whispered as they turned. "Not a single one," Catherine replied. They returned to the ranch that night as husband and wife, and everything felt both different and exactly the same. The house was still the same structure, the land still the same acreage, but it all meant something new now. It was not just Owen's ranch anymore. It was theirs, a place they would build together. Catherine moved her things from the spare room to Owen's bedroom, their bedroom now, and they stayed up late talking about their plans. She wanted to convert one of the smaller buildings into a proper studio with better light. He wanted to expand the horse breeding operation, maybe buy some more land to the west. She dreamed of teaching art classes to local children. He imagined their own children growing up on this land, learning to ride, learning to appreciate beauty in all its forms. "We will need a bigger house eventually," Catherine said, curled against his side. "More bedrooms." "Planning on a lot of children?" Owen asked, amused. "At least a few. A ranch this size needs children to fill it, to carry it forward." She paused. "Is that what you want?" "Yes," Owen said simply. "I want everything with you. Children, grandchildren, decades of life together. I want it all." That first winter as a married couple was harsh, with blizzards that buried the ranch in snow and temperatures that dropped so low the water in the troughs froze solid. But inside the ranch house, there was warmth and laughter and the constant scratch of Catherine's pencil as she sketched, even when she could not paint. They spent evenings by the fire, Owen reading while Catherine drew, occasionally reaching out to touch each other just to confirm the other was real. Catherine sent photographs of her paintings to galleries in Philadelphia, New York, and Boston, hoping for interest. She tried not to get her hopes up, but Owen could see the anticipation in her eyes every time the mail came. In February, a letter arrived from a gallery in Boston expressing interest in showing her Western scenes, asking if she could send more examples of her work. Catherine screamed with joy when she read the letter, throwing herself into Owen's arms. "They want to show my work. An actual gallery wants to exhibit my paintings." Owen spun her around, delighting in her happiness. "Of course they do. You are brilliant." Over the next months, Catherine painted furiously, creating a series of canvases depicting life on the Kansas frontier. She painted cowboys and cattle drives, prairie fires and thunderstorms, the quiet beauty of dawn on the plains. She painted Owen working with the horses, though he complained about sitting still for so long. She painted the ranch in all seasons, documenting the life they were building together. In May, the gallery confirmed they would exhibit her work in a show scheduled for September. They wanted 20 paintings and offered to pay for shipping. Catherine could hardly believe it, reading and rereading the letter to make sure she had understood correctly. "You should go," Owen said. "To Boston for the opening. You should be there to see your work displayed, to meet the people who appreciate it." Catherine shook her head. "I could not leave you for that long. The travel alone would take weeks." "I will come with you," Owen said, the idea forming as he spoke. "We will make it a trip. You can show me the East and I will be there to watch you triumph." Her eyes lit up. "Really? You would do that, Catherine? I would go anywhere with you. Besides, it is time I saw more of the country than Kansas and Texas. Might as well see it with the most beautiful, talented woman in America on my arm." They made plans for the trip, arranging for neighbors to watch the ranch while they were gone. George agreed to oversee things as well, making daily visits to ensure the horses were cared for. In August, they took the train east, and Owen experienced a different America than the one he had always known. The crowded cities, The buildings stacked on top of each other, the sheer number of people pressed together. Catherine was a good guide, showing him the sights but also pointing out things she did not miss: the rigid social expectations, the stifling propriety, the way women like her were expected to conform to narrow roles. Owen understood more deeply what she had escaped, what it had cost her to choose her own path. The gallery opening was a revelation. Owen stood beside Catherine in his best suit, feeling out of place among the fashionably dressed city people, but intensely proud as they walked through the gallery looking at her paintings, hung on white walls under perfect lighting. People clustered around the work, murmuring appreciation, and several asked Catherine questions about her techniques and her subjects. A critic from the Boston Herald called her work a fresh and authentic vision of the American West, untainted by romantic sentimentalism, capturing both the beauty and the harshness of frontier life. Catherine nearly cried when she read the review the next day. 3 paintings sold on opening night. Over the next week, 5 more sold. The gallery asked if she could provide more work for a follow-up show, and suddenly, Catherine had a career, real recognition for her talent. They celebrated with dinner at a fancy restaurant, and Owen raised his glass to toast his wife. To Catherine Xavier, whose talent is finally being recognized as it should be. To us, Catherine corrected. To the partnership that made this possible. I could not have done any of this without you, Owen. Without the ranch, the space, the support. They returned to Kansas in October, and the ranch had never looked better to Owen than when it came into view after weeks away. Catherine sighed happily beside him in the wagon they had hired in Ellsworth. I am glad we went, she said, but I am gladder to be home. Home, Owen echoed, liking the sound of that. Life settled into a new rhythm. Catherine painted commission pieces for the gallery while also working on personal projects. Owen expanded the breeding program, gaining a reputation for quality horses. The ranch prospered, and with prosperity came the ability to make improvements, building the studio Catherine wanted, expanding the barn, adding rooms onto the house. In the spring of 1884, Catherine discovered she was expecting their first child. She told Owen one morning at breakfast, simply setting a tiny pair of knitted booties beside his coffee cup. He stared at them for a moment before understanding crashed over him. Really? He asked, his voice cracking. Really, Catherine confirmed, smiling. Mrs. Rodriguez has been teaching me to knit. I wanted to surprise you. Owen stood so fast his chair fell over, pulling Catherine into his arms and holding her gently as if she might break. We are going to have a baby. We are going to have a baby, she agreed, laughing and crying at the same time. Their son was born in December, during a snowstorm that buried the ranch for 3 days. The birth was hard, and Owen paced the downstairs while Mrs. Rodriguez and the doctor attended Catherine upstairs. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Mrs. Rodriguez appeared at the top of the stairs, beaming. You have a son, Mr. Owen. Strong and healthy. Owen took the stairs 3 at a time, bursting into the bedroom to find Catherine exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She looked up at him with tears streaming down her face. Meet your son, she whispered. Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed, looking down at the tiny red face, the small fists waving aimlessly, the eyes that would probably be green like Catherine's. Love overwhelmed him, so powerful it was almost frightening. He is perfect, Owen managed. You are perfect. Thank you. They named him Oliver, and he transformed their lives in ways both exhausting and wonderful. Catherine set up a cradle in her studio so she could paint while he napped, and Owen learned to work with one hand while holding a baby in the other. The ranch hands found it endlessly amusing to see their tough boss turned soft and silly by an infant. Oliver grew into a curious, active toddler who loved the horses as much as his parents did. Catherine painted him constantly, documenting every stage of his growth, and these paintings became some of her most popular works. Apparently, people back east loved scenes of frontier family life. When Oliver was 2, Catherine became pregnant again, and their daughter Hannah was born in the summer of 1887. She had Owen's dark hair and Catherine's artistic eye, and she was quieter than her brother, but just as determined. The ranch house rang with children's laughter, with the noise and chaos of family life, and Owen could hardly remember what the silence had been like before. Catherine continued to paint, juggling her art career with motherhood, and Owen supported her fully, taking the children on ranch rounds when she needed uninterrupted time to work. They hired a local girl to help with housework and childcare, freeing Catherine to paint and Owen to manage the growing ranch operation. The years passed in a blur of seasons, of children growing, of horses bred and sold, of paintings created and exhibited. Oliver learned to ride before he could properly walk, and Hannah showed early signs of inheriting her mother's artistic talent, always drawing or painting, seeing the world in colors and shapes. In 1890, George Zimmerman died peacefully in his sleep, and Catherine grieved deeply for the uncle who had given her sanctuary when she needed it most. They buried him in the Ellsworth Cemetery, and Catherine painted a portrait of him from memory to hang in their home, honoring the man who had believed in her when her own parents would not. More children came, 2 more sons and another daughter, until the Xavier house was bursting with life and noise. Catherine converted the entire second floor of the barn into studios, one for herself and one for the children, teaching them to see beauty and to capture it in art. Owen built a larger corral and training facility, and his horses became known throughout Kansas and beyond for their quality. They prospered not just materially, but in all the ways that mattered. Their marriage deepened over the years, weathering the inevitable conflicts and challenges, but always returning to the foundation of mutual respect and genuine love. They still took evening rides out to the rise to watch the sunset, though now often with children in tow. Catherine still sketched constantly, her portfolio full of images of their life together. One evening in 1895, when Oliver was 11 and preparing to help with his first cattle drive, Catherine pulled out the sketch she had drawn all those years ago, the one showing their possible future. Owen looked at it, then at the life they had actually built, and was struck by how accurate her vision had been. The house, the children, the sense of fulfillment and partnership, she had seen it all. "You drew our future," he said softly, "and we lived it." "We are still living it," Catherine corrected. "This is not the end of the story, Owen. This is just the middle." She was right, of course. The years continued to unfold, bringing joys and sorrows in equal measure. They weathered droughts and cattle diseases, economic downturns, and personal losses. Oliver grew up to take over much of the ranch management, showing his father's skill with horses and land. Hannah became a renowned artist in her own right, studying in Chicago before returning to Kansas to open her own gallery in Wichita. The younger children found their own paths, some staying on the ranch, others venturing out to build lives elsewhere. Owen and Catherine grew older together, their hair graying, their faces lined, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary in 1909, with all their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch. Owen looked around at the crowd filling his home and felt overwhelmed by the richness of the life he had built. "Remember when this house was empty and silent?" he said to Catherine as they danced to music provided by their musically inclined youngest son on the fiddle. "I remember a lonely rancher who needed someone to see his horses," Catherine replied, her eyes twinkling. "I remember falling in love with both the man and the land. Best day of my life was finding you sketching by that fence. Best day of mine was saying yes when you asked me to draw our future together." They danced on, surrounded by the future they had imagined and created, by children and grandchildren, by the evidence of a life well lived and love well honored. The ranch stretched out around them, still beautiful, still full of horses and possibility. As the party wound down and the grandchildren were put to bed in every available space, Owen and Catherine walked out onto the porch, looking up at the stars scattered across the Kansas sky. Catherine leaned against his shoulder, and Owen wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "Choosing this life instead of returning to Philadelphia, instead of becoming famous in the big cities?" Catherine was quiet for a moment, considering. "I became famous enough. My work is in museums, my students are teaching others, my children and grandchildren carry forward what I taught them about seeing beauty. But more than that, I have this. I have you, I have this family, I have a life full of love and purpose. What more could anyone want?" "Nothing," Owen agreed. "Absolutely nothing." They stood together in the darkness, and Owen thought about how his life had changed that September morning when he rode out to check the pasture and found a woman sketching his horses. He had been so lonely then, so lost in grief and routine that he had forgotten what it meant to be alive. Catherine had reminded him, had shown him that life could be more than just endurance, that it could be joy and creation and partnership. The years continued their steady march forward. Owen and Catherine celebrated their 30th, then their 40th, then their 50th wedding anniversary, each milestone marking another chapter in a story that just kept getting richer. They faced the 20th century together, watching as automobiles replaced horses in town, as electricity came to Ellsworth, as the wild frontier they had known was gradually tamed and civilized. But the ranch remained a constant, still raising horses, still teaching children, still serving as the family's gathering place. Catherine painted until her hands grew too stiff with arthritis to hold a brush properly, and even then she supervised and taught, passing her knowledge to the next generation. Owen worked the ranch until his body insisted on retirement, then settled for supervising from the porch, offering advice to Oliver and the grandchildren who helped run the operation. On a golden October afternoon in 1920, Catherine and Owen sat together on that same porch, watching their great-grandchildren play in the yard. They were both in their 70s now, slowed by age but still sharp-minded, still deeply connected. "I want to show you something," Catherine said, standing carefully and offering her hand to Owen. He took it, letting her pull him up, and they walked slowly into the house and up to what had once been her studio but was now more of a gallery, full of decades of her work. She led him to a canvas covered with a cloth, one he had not seen before. With a flourish that reminded him of the young woman he had fallen in love with, she pulled away the cloth to reveal a new painting. It showed the two of them, old now, sitting on the porch of the ranch house with children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren scattered around them like flowers in a garden. Behind them, the prairie stretched endlessly, and horses ran free against a sunset sky. But what struck Owen was the way Catherine had painted them, their hands clasped, their faces turned toward each other, the love between them visible in every brushstroke. "Our future," Catherine said softly. "The one I have been drawing and redrawing for 40 years, the one we built together." Owen felt tears sting his eyes, something that happened more easily now that he was old. "It is beautiful. You are beautiful. All of this is so beautiful." "We did well, did we not?" Catherine asked, leaning against him. "That lonely rancher and the woman sketching his horses, we built something worth building." "We built everything," Owen replied, wrapping his arms around his wife, his partner, his love. "We built a whole world." They stood like that for a long time, looking at the painting that captured not just what they looked like but what they had become, what they meant to each other, and to the family they had created. Outside, the prairie grass whispered in the wind, and somewhere in the distance, horses called to each other, their voices carrying across the land that had witnessed this love story from its beginning. When Catherine passed away peacefully in her sleep 2 years later, Owen grieved deeply, but without regret. She had given him 40 years of partnership, of love, of the kind of life he had not even known to dream of before she appeared by his fence with her sketchbook. He kept painting in the room they now called the Catherine Zimmerman Gallery, surrounded by her work, by the visual record of their life together. Owen lived another 5 years, long enough to see Oliver's grandchildren born, long enough to know that the ranch and Catherine's artistic legacy would continue into future generations. When he died in the spring of 1927, with his children and grandchildren gathered around his bed, his last words were about Catherine, about how he would see her soon, about how much he had loved drawing their future together. They buried him beside her in the Ellsworth Cemetery, under the wide Kansas sky they had both loved. The headstone read, "Owen and Catherine Xavier, partners in life and love, 1882 forever." Their children ensured that the ranch remained in the family, that Catherine's paintings continued to be shown and appreciated, that the story of the lonely rancher and the artist who found each other was passed down through generations. The ranch still stands today, run by Xavier descendants who breed horses and teach art, who honor the love story that created their family. In the house, now a historical landmark, Catherine's paintings line the walls, and visitors can see the progression of a life lived fully, captured in oils and charcoal, in images of horses and children, of prairie sunsets and family gatherings, of love made visible through art. And on a shelf in what was once their bedroom, now preserved as it was when they lived there, sits a sketchbook. Its pages are yellowed with age, but the images are still clear. A lonely rancher standing by a fence, horses running free, 2 people holding hands, looking toward the horizon. A family gathered around a table, grandchildren playing in the yard. A life imagined and then lived, drawn first in charcoal and then created through 40 years of partnership, respect, and deep, abiding love. The story of Owen and Catherine Xavier is the story of 2 people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose to build something beautiful together despite the odds, who proved that sometimes the best futures are the ones you draw together, one day, one choice, one act of love at a time. Their legacy is not just in the ranch that still bears their name or the paintings that still hang in galleries, but in the example they left behind of what it means to truly see another person, to honor their gifts, and to build a life where both partners can flourish. In the end, that September morning in 1882, when Owen rode out and found Catherine sketching his horses, changed not just 2 lives, but generations of lives that followed, creating ripples that extended far beyond what either of them could have imagined. They had drawn their future together, and in doing so had drawn a map that others could follow, a testament to the power of love, art, and the courage to choose happiness over convention.